What's going on, guys? Welcome to the circus, and today I'm going to do a reading from the Congressional Record. That is the current communist goals as of 1963, according to The Naked Communist. Now, The Naked Communist is a book that was written by a guy with the last name Skousen. And just so you guys know ahead of time, he's had his work decried by the likes of Media Matters, the Southern Poverty Law Center, Mother Jones, etc., etc., etc. In fact, Dr. Ben Carson, having really liked his anti-communist work, had an entire smear campaign dedicated to his appreciation of this man's literature during the 2016 presidential race. And it also caused a big hoopla in Los Angeles back in 1987. I will link all of these in the description so you can get a better feel for yourself of the man who wrote the book that got read into Congress on this day. Alright, so let's get into it.
Mr. Erlong, Mr. Speaker, Miss Patricia Nordman of DeLand, Florida, is an ardent and articulate opponent of communism. At Miss Nordman's request, I include in the record, under unanimous consent, the following: current communist goals, which she identifies as an excerpt from The Naked Communist. Current communist goals. 1. U.S. acceptance of coexistence as the only alternative to atomic war. Number 2. U.S. willingness to capitulate in preference to engaging in atomic war. Number 3, develop the illusion that total disarmament by the United States would be a demonstration of moral strength. Number 4, permit free trade between all nations, regardless of communist affiliation and regardless of whether or not items could be used for war. Number 5, extension of long-term loans to Russia and Soviet satellites. Number 6, provide American aid to all nations, regardless of communist denomination. 7. Grant recognition of Red China, admission of Red China to the UN. Number 8. Set up East and West Germany as separate states in spite of Khrushchev's promise in 1955 to settle the German question by free elections under supervision of the UN. 9. Prolong the conferences to ban atomic tests because the United States has agreed to suspend tests as long as negotiations are in progress. 10. Allow all Soviet satellites individual representation in the UN. 11. Promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one-world government with its own independent armed forces. Some communist leaders believe the world can be taken over as easily by the UN as by Moscow. Sometimes these two centers compete with each other as they are now doing in the Congo. 12. Resist any attempt to outlaw the Communist Party. 13. Do away with all loyalty oaths. 14. Continue giving Russia access to the U.S. Patent Office. 15. Capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. 16. Use technical decisions of the courts to weaken basic American institutions by claiming their activities violate civil rights. 17. Get control of schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of the teachers' unions. Put the party line in textbooks. All right, the party line is what the communists refer to as their narrative, their ethos. That's the party line. So that we need the communist ethos in the textbooks. Gain control of all student newspapers. Use student riots to foment public protests against programs or organizations which are under communist attack. Infiltrate the press. Get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, and policy-making positions. 21. Gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures. 22. Continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression. An American communist cell was told to, quote, eliminate all good sculpture from parks and buildings, substitute shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms, close quote. 23. Control art critics and directors of art museums. Quote, our plan is to promote ugliness, repulsive, meaningless art, close quote. 24. Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them, quote, censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. 25. Break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and television. Of course, you know the internet would be on that list if it was invented at that point, or if he knew about it. 26. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as, quote, normal, natural, and healthy, close quote. 27. Infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. Discredit the Bible and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. 28. Eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools on the ground that it violates the principle of separation of church and state. So these goals were originally published in 1958, even though they were read into the Congressional record in 1963. 29. Discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate, old-fashioned, out of step with modern needs, a hindrance to cooperation between nations on a worldwide basis. Discredit the American founding fathers, present them as selfish aristocrats who had no concern for the common man. Belittle all forms of American culture and discourage the teaching of American history on the ground that it was only a minor part of the big picture. Give more emphasis to Russian history since the communists took over. 32. Support any socialist movement to give centralized control over any part of the culture, education, social agencies, welfare programs, mental health clinics, etc. 33. Eliminate all laws or procedures which interfere with the operation of the communist apparatus. 34. Eliminate the House Committee on Un-American Activities. 35. Discredit and eventually dismantle the FBI. 36. Infiltrate and gain control of, notice this, more unions. 37. Infiltrate and gain control of big business. 38. Transfer some of the powers of arrest from the police to social agencies. Treat all behavioral problems as psychiatric disorders which no one but psychiatrists can understand or treat. Dominate the psychiatric profession and use mental health laws as a means of gaining coercive control over those who oppose communist goals. Red flag laws. Number 40, discredit the family as an institution. Encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. 41, emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. Attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and the retarding of children to suppressive influence of parents. 42. Create the impression that violence and insurrection are legitimate aspects of the American tradition, that students and special interest groups should rise up and use united force to solve economic, political, and social problems. 43. Overthrow all colonial governments before native populations are ready to self-govern. 44. Internationalize the Panama Canal. 45. Repeal the Connolly Reservation so the United States cannot prevent the World Court from seizing jurisdiction over domestic problems, given the World Court jurisdiction over nations and individuals alike. Those are the 45 communist goals that were read into Congressional Record on Thursday, January 10th, 1963. They are an excerpt from a book by Cleon Skousen called The Naked Communist. Now, when I read these, my initial thought was, wow, this was as accurate as Yuri. And of course, Yuri Bezmenov is what I would consider the gold standard of information regarding ideological subversion and the Communist Party. But when I started looking into this book and this writer and the people around him, it seems like, how do I put this? It seems as if there is a coordinated media attack against the writer of that book. And it's insane that I've looked into him now, and I disagree with a lot of his opinions and a lot of the things that he said. He's like, half right at best, but it doesn't mean he's not a victim of Soviet communist propaganda. And when you put something like this into Congressional Record because of your book called The Naked Communist, and I don't know, what would you guys say? 38 out of 45? 40? I mean, all 45 of them are in the works, but most of them are completed. So, when I started to look into this guy outside of this read in the Congressional Record, I started seeing a pattern again.
And what pattern are you talking about, one might ask? And to you, I would say, it's the same pattern that they use on President Trump. In the articles I have in the comments section, you'll see that it's the same thing that they did to Glenn Beck. There's the entire John Birch Society. There is a methodology. And the funny thing about the methodology is one of the things that I put in there is it doesn't need to be done. Almost always, exclusively, every time they attack a person in this way, that person, i.e. Donald Trump, has enough actual reality that is not good that you could just beat people over the head with that. So it's unnecessary to misquote, mischaracterize, lie about what he said, wrote. It's just not necessary. And that's part of the pattern. They want you to think not just bad things about this person, but very specific bad things about this person. I guess that's what reveals the pattern. And that's all I'm going to say on it. I just read to you the Communist Manifesto, essentially, read in the Congressional Record in 1963, but written about in 1958. Not to mention the fact that Yuri was touring for decades upon decades, and yet here we are. The majority of this list is completed. So when you see big names, big people who have reputations, saying BLM is a Marxist organization, it might be time to take a few minutes out of your day and find out what exactly does that mean. What is a Marxist organization? And of course, I'm not talking to y'all because y'all smartest audience on the planet Earth. Anyways, I will upload again later on in the week